Hey guys, Kathy Iconis here, ready to kick off our next session, the sales workflow. And this one is a doozy. Look at everything we are going to cover in this session. That's a lot, right? We are going to be talking about the workflow, invoicing, payments, everything about sales that we can cover. Um, Pretty much everything that's possible in here, we're going to be going through it. So what I want to do and what you will see is I'm trying to put these into little buckets of information. So within this one long recording, you will see that we go in and out of the different buckets based off of the slides. So I'm going to try to cover a topic and then it'll kind of go in and out and go on to the next one. And what I'm doing is at the bottom of this session with the notes to everything, you will see the times as to when we go into the next slide or the next bucket of information. That way you can kind of pick and fast forward to where you want to go if you need to take a break or something like that. Because again, this one is a doozy. Okay, so are you ready to kick it off? Are you ready? Okay. Okay, let's talk about the workflow, the very basic overall of the sales workflow. So, first, we're going to have all of these things that come together to create a sale. So, we have estimates, product services, billable charges, all of these things that will show up or can lead to the actual invoice here. Then we move on and we receive the payment. Okay, alternatively, we might use a sales receipt that has the invoice and the received payment all into one. And then I'm going to talk about the importance of booking the payment into undeposited funds here, which I think is key to helping avoid any mistakes down the road. And then once we actually put that into the bank, then we will deposit it and it moves from undeposited funds into the bank at that point. Okay, so before we get started in the invoicing, we have to set up products and services within QBO. And products and services are the specific items that we sell or we can also buy. And this is a list item within QBO. It allows for another dimension in reporting where we can have several products that are grouped together under one revenue account. And we can still run reports by products. So we can run the financials by chart of account, but we can also run reports by products. So it's a nice little layout there. There are four types of products that you'll see here. We have inventory, which are products where you do want to track the quantity on hand. Non-inventory are products that you don't actually need that quantity on hand amount for, where it's not actually inventory tracking within QBO. Then services is anything that's not a product, right? And then bundles, which is a group of products. It can be any variation of the inventory, non inventory, and service. We'll take a look at that. Okay, when we get into QBO, we would click on a product or service and edit it. And when we are editing the fields in here, these now become defaults when we utilize that product or service in the invoice. Okay, so as you can see here, we have our name, we have a SKU, we have a category, which is a way that you can group inventory items or products and services, together. We can put in the class right here. And within the class, that then becomes the default every time we utilize that on an invoice or a sales receipt or some other sales form. You can always change it once you're in the sales form, but it becomes the default. So it's a time saving thing here if we actually fill out all of this stuff. We can put in the description, put in the sales price, and then this is the account that the item is actually mapped to. So every time I use ABC service, it is going to be recorded to training income when it is a sales transaction. Okay. Here you can look at the price rules of the product. And let me actually dive in to QBO and we'll look at that to see a little bit more of what all's going on. So like I said before, we click on the gear icon and we look at list, products and services, okay? Now, you can also go to invoicing on the left and go to products and services. So there's two ways to get there if you need to. And this is the listing of products and services we have down here of everything. So if I click on edit this, that's where we're seeing that edit of the transactions. And like I said, these are defaults for these fields that we can fill out. Now, scrolling down, so you see I have a price rule set up on here. We'll talk about price rules soon, okay? But I want to talk about if you are also buying this product or service, that's where you would check that off. So you have an option to buy and sell this, just sell it, or just buy the product and service. So again, default description, the cost, preferred vendor if you'd like, and here is where we map it to the actual expense account. So if we're using it on an expense type transaction, it will go, it will say where to code it here. If we're using it on a sales transaction, it'll code it to an income account here. Okay, so that's how we go in and edit those. And like everything else, we can, we have the option to make it inactive, duplicate, all of that. So let's look at a inventory item right here. Within inventory items, you'll have a place here to track the quantity on hand, and you can adjust that quantity if you want to. You can set a reorder point. This will be a point where when sales get down to a certain amount, it will notify you that you need to order more of that inventory item. Now, if you have an open purchase order, you will see the amounts on here. The thing about inventory is that you also need to have an asset account associated with that inventory item, because now we have three things at play here. We have an asset account, a revenue account, and an expense account. So all of those things need to be mapped in this area. See, there is no option for unchecking sales or purchases within the inventory item because we need it all to be able to calculate inventory. Now, then the other thing I want to talk about is this bundle. So if I look at the bundle, it is simply just putting in other products or services in this area to bundle the items together. We can set it up so that clients, the end client, wouldn't see what individual items make up that bundle, or we can display the components to that end client on the transaction. So we can add, we can delete, we can move this stuff around if we want to, all of that. So we have a lot of options here. But remember, this is all customizable, right? So this is basically the default, what happens on the sales forms itself. So if I go in and create an invoice and utilize that bundle example, you can see I have the information down here, right? And you'll see I have one item and then how here down here is my two items. So all of these are grouped underneath this bundle example. The client will just see the bundle example on the invoice. This line item, they will not see this information down here because I didn't check that box to show them all. Within here, I can customize this. I can change this stuff around. I can delete an item if it's not actually part of the bundle that I'm selling here. I can add something, so I can put in this service right here and then simply move it up into that bundle and it becomes part of it now. So super cool thing of being able to utilize that bundle on as a product or service on things. Okay, now let's move on to customers. So within the customer list, this you can go in and edit the customer information, and this is all you're filling out all this information that are used again for the defaults on the invoicing themselves, and you can add other information. So let's dive into QBO and look at customers. So if I click over on clients, remember invoicing, I can go to clients right there. You'll see this listing of all the clients, right? So I'm going to click on this one itself, the bailbond.com one or whatever. And I would just click on edit. And this gives me the information in here. Let me get rid of that. So we have our company name. You can put in the contact first, middle, last name, then what you want the name to be displayed as. So if I had a name in here, it would give me the option to do Bob Green, Green Bob. I can change that display name if I want to. I can print when I do checks, if I'm doing a refund receipt or something like that, I can change the name there. I actually want this to be that. So I copied and paste that over. Now we have the, let's jump up here. Email. Every time we want to send out an email, send the invoice to a client via email, we can do that. We can put in multiple emails by just using that comma, and you can send that invoice to those multiple emails when you want to. Phone, all of this. Here's where you would set up a sub client if you want to do this. It is not the same as a project, but this would just be a sub client if you want to set that up. And then you have the option of, are you going to bill with the parent account, or do you bill it with this client specifically? So you want to know which one you want to go with on here. So it could be, it depends on the situation as to what you're going to go with on that. Now, okay, here we have our address. You can put in the shipping address if you have one. We have notes. So if I enter in notes right here, this is actually the same area. Oh, let me uncheck that. Same area as right here. So I can actually click here and add more notes, right? And then come back into edit and you will see notes again right there. Tax info, if this client is tax exempt, I can do that. And it remembers that every time I do a sales transaction for the client. It knows that that client is then tax exempt. So it'll override any sales tax that could be calculated for the client. Payment and billing. If you are connected to payments, this is where you would go in and store the credit card information for the client. You would click credit card and then it will give you an option to enter in the credit card information there. Then later on, you can always use that credit card information to record payment off an invoice or a sales receipt. So kind of cool right there to help with some automation of things. Preferred delivery method. This is just what happens here is it just ends up being a checkbox on the invoice, and it ends up being something that you can filter on. If you're looking at all of the invoices as a list, you can filter as to things that need to be print later or send later. Okay, so if you have some sort of workflow where you create everything and someone looks at it and it needs to be printed and you want to track if it's been printed yet or not, you could use that print later, or same thing on send later sort of thing. And then once you actually print or send it, you can mark it. QBO will mark it as such and will untag it within your invoice area, so you won't see that when it's filtered anymore on something that still needs to be sent or printed. Default terms, again, this is just a default. It will be something you can still change on invoices later, but it automatically populates it for you. So if you have clients that have different terms, definitely set up say which terms are which in here, and that will help with the entry of your invoices. Language, we can now send invoices in different languages, and it kind of tells you what language is here the default for the client. What language do we want to have everything in when it goes out to the client? Okay. Attachments, do you want to attach anything to the client itself? This is not for the sales transaction. It's just at the client level. And then any additional info, actually it is just the client type here. So I can now apply types to clients. So this is set up as construction, retail, wholesale. You have the ability to customize this over here. So let me jump out of that and go back over to clients. You'll see right here on the clients page, client types. This is where you customize it and you can edit these, make these inactive, add new ones, all of that. There are some reports where you can group or sort by client type. There's some features that you can utilize client types, like price rules. So that might be something that you want to look at. It's not necessary, but something you might want to look at. Now, if you want to inactivate a client or delete them, that's where you would do it within their information. You just make inactive. Remember, you don't actually delete anything in QBO when it's these kind of list items. It's just making inactive. So if I want to go back to my client list, I have that option right here to include inactive, and that's how I would reactivate a client. If I make someone inactive, it no longer shows up in my drop-down list to create sales transactions or in any other way where you have the drop-down list for clients. It would just take it out of that list, so you can't do anything with it. So if you need to reactivate it, just come back to this clients page. If it could say customers or tenants or donors. This all comes down to company settings is how this is named, but it's still in the same place. Invoicing, this one right here. Clients or donors or tenants or customers, whatever we name it, it'll be right there. And then you come to this list and you hit the gear icon and you can include the inactive items. So once you have those, then you can reactivate the item from there. Now let's jump into price rules. So price rules are actually maintained under list, whereas customer types was under the client area, the customer area. The price rules are under lists. Okay, so there are 1,000,001 different options that you can use for price rules on here. We can change the date range where the rule will be applied, the customer type. Remember I showed you about customer type. Or the customers themselves who qualify for the price rules. Do you want it to be a product or category, product category, or the type of product, specific product that qualifies for it? Then what are the acceptable price adjustments that you want to do, and do you want to increase or decrease the sales price by a percentage, fixed amount, all of this stuff. Okay, so let's jump into price rules right here, and I'm going to go to the gear icon, all lists, right? And then here I will click on price rules. So you can see I have one price rule set up. We can set up a new one if we want. Come up with some sort of name, right? Test 2 or something. So do we have a start date or an end date to this price rule? Do we want to just do select individually which clients? This is the customer types that we have. Do we want to just do like all retail trade clients? Great. Same thing here. Do we want to select individually of the products? Do all inventory products. Okay. And then do I want to put in a fixed amount for this? So I can say the adjusted price is this, increase by 15, apply. Let's see what that does. Fixed amount, cost per item. Let's just do that one. So this is $15 right there. Okay. And then save and close. And so this helps you cut down on the time it takes when doing your invoicing and everything. You can set up these price rules. And remember when we were looking at products and services themselves, you can see on them the product, the rules themselves on here. That's what I was going for. Okay, so we see the price rules on that, and you can also add new from here, and it creates a new one if you want one on there. So that's how price rules work. It all goes back to what do you want that rule to change based on those different variables that you saw in the price rule area. Okay, next we have billable expenses and charges. So these are things that can be used on invoices or sales transactions themselves. Okay, it can be expenses, bills, time entry, delayed charges, credits, all of this sort of stuff. And when we are creating an invoice, that shows up on the right hand side of an invoice that we can then apply over into our invoice. And what I like to do, so let's jump into QBO and talk about these different things of stuff. So first, if you want to see if you have any unbilled charges in here, you can run an unbilled charges report. Unbilled time just shows you the time entry that has not been billed yet. Unbilled charges give you expenses and time. So I just prefer that one. Okay. That one didn't like me. Get back over. Lost my mouse. Here we go. Unbilled charges. I think I waited too long to click on it. So here I can see that I have an unbilled charge for our bail bond client, right? So if I were to go in to QBO, create a new invoice for that client, now you can see that I have a charge sitting over here. We'll talk about estimates in a little bit, but right now we're going to talk about billable expenses, okay? So we have this charge sitting over here, and that's how I can apply it easily to the invoice. So you can see if I have a lot of charges that are just being tracked within QBO, I can easily apply them over to the invoice. It cuts down a whole bunch of data entry, right? And then on here, I can see that it is linked to the charge itself. So how do we create these charges? I got my little send later button. I got to uncheck that. So save, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to the expense itself. And first you're going to see, here we have, it is actually set up as a delayed charge. Okay. So I see the delayed charge, I put it to a client, I have the date of the delayed charge and all this information. So sometimes when I have clients that we have a lot of stuff going on, like little projects that we're invoicing things on, I'll put it in as a delayed charge. So they're all just sitting out there and ready to be added to the next invoice that I create for the client. The other thing you can do is when you are working with expenses themselves, you have the option here to check to see if the item is billable, and you have an option to add a markup. Now you just need to say what client this is. So we want to go back over to this client. Let's see, what do we want to say this is? Okay, I'm not even going to put in a vendor name, but this is, here we have this set up as an item, an expense where I have marked it as billable. Now, I can click view, right? And this shows a new transaction. It's called a billable expense. You can't get to billable expenses unless you're clicking on the expense or the invoice to get to the actual item. Here, you can have the information. You can see if change the account that things are coded to right here, but really this is the thing that is either has been billed or has not been billed yet. Okay, so I'm going to cancel out of that, and now if I'm looking at my unbilled charges, I have now a new thing, my $200 and my $40 markup on things, right? So I'm going to go back to that recent invoice that I created, click on that invoice, right? Do my little arrow up here, and now I can add the new expense, that billable expense. So I have that, and you'll see here that your client won't see the markup. If you, in company settings, you can actually change it so the client could see the markup if you wanted to go there. I'm not sure if you want to do that. So we have that. in there. I'm going to save and close, and let's show you one more thing where if I'm going to go in and do a time activity, I can come in here, I can put that in for that client. Let's come up with some service billable, and we're going to say it's 1.5 hours on there. So now I have a billable time, right? I'm going to save and close. And that again is showing up on my unbilled charges list. So again, I can go back to that invoice, right? And now I can add the time. Oops. I can add the time to the invoice right here. Okay, so now I have all of these things linked. And when I do that, it's all linked together. My unbilled charges report goes to 0, right? There's nothing listed on there. So I've done everything that's outstanding and I've added them all to invoices as necessary. If I were to go in and delete a line and unlink it, it goes back over to this side area to be used later. And if I save and close and look at my unbilled charges report, it is now back over here. Okay? Now, what if I want to delete it, but I don't want it on this unbilled charges anymore, right? So I'm going to actually just delete this line and remove the line. So it keeps the connection, the link, and it shows I still have 2 linked transactions, but it does not show up in my unbilled charges report. So I'm going to actually delete that, remove the line, 2, save and close, right? And in unbilled charges, that report did not update. They did not add those 2 lines. We still just have that time charge that's sitting out there. So that's how we deal with these unbilled charges on things. When we look at transactions over here, we're going to have the delayed credit and delayed charge, which I showed you guys, right? I showed you the delayed charge. The delayed credit is just the negative of a charge, something to be applied to an invoice in the future if you want. We can add billable expenses on expenses themselves and time entry. So that's where we're going to get all of that stuff. Again, you could do it on bills and checks too. All of those, yeah. I think of these as all the same kind of expense transactions. They have the same sort of lines on them, right? And so the time entry. So all of those things can be applied to an invoice, and it's just sitting out there. They're not actually, with the delayed charge and credit and the time entry, they're not actually impacting the financials anywhere. They're not dollar values until they get added to an invoice. Obviously, an expense is a dollar value, but they're called non-posting entries because they don't actually impact the financial statements until you add them to an invoice, which is then something that posts and impacts the numbers. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so that's unbilled charges or billable expenses and charges for you. Now on to estimates. So estimates are, again, also non-posting entries. They're things that are just kind of sitting out there waiting for you to create an invoice off of. So it's actual, a monetary transaction that happens. Estimates can be used to provide a customer with the expected amount that's going to be billed. And once you have the estimate in place, you can simply create the invoice from that estimate. So estimates is also where we do progress invoicing, and I will show you that in a segment in just a little bit, but I just want to talk about the estimates themselves first. One really cool thing about estimates is that if you have a mobile device, an iPhone, a mobile phone, or you're using the app on a tablet like an iPad or something, you can actually get clients to sign off on those estimates in person. Okay, so this is a screenshot from my iPad, and you can see that we have the estimate, and right here you can get signature. So if you're sitting there right there, you can create this estimate and get approval right on the spot for what's going on. And then you can see my little thing. It gave you a heart. And this is where you get the signature and put in a name if you want to, and you can accept the estimate right there. So pretty cool feature there. I don't think it's one that many people talk about, so it could be a good selling point if you have clients where they're out in the field and they need to get that signature to approve the estimate on the spot. Now, in QBO itself, we would just go to New and create Estimate. Okay. We have three different things, or four actually: pending, accepted, closed, rejected. You can run estimate reports so you can see the open estimates and all of that sort of fun stuff. But it's just a simple, it looks just like an invoice right here. It's just, like I said, not posting. I'm going to go and look at a recent estimate and click right here. And you can see that I have this estimate in place. You can see it's been accepted, but I have not created the invoice for it yet. Just so you know too, you can add attachment to estimates right here. And you can include those in emails to clients if you want, or you just have the attachment saved on there. I don't know. However you want to do it. But here's the thing. So we can create an invoice, or we can also copy this to a purchase order. But I'm going to create the invoice from here, and we'll show you more of this in a second. But we just go straight into this is what it looks like. We're creating the actual invoice itself. And again, it looks like the same thing. We're just moving it over, and it's really simple and nice to be able to use. I'm going to cancel that. Go yes, and I'm going to cancel out of this too. Remember, I was showing you before on billable expenses. I could go to this client, right? And you'll see that the estimate also sits over here. So I could just simply click this and add the estimate and copy it over into the invoice. So you can do it either way, and then that would close out the estimate once it's done. And when it comes to reporting and that sort of thing, again, seeing what level it's at. So if I save it, save and close, and I want to go back to that estimate, let's see if it's in my recent. So we want to go back to this estimate. You can see that it is now closed because we've invoiced everything and we've linked that to that transaction. Then we can click on the invoice and all fun and awesome stuff. Cool. So that's how estimates work within QBO. Okay, our next topic is the invoice customization. And I'm going to show you all the different options that we have going on. But know that we can save multiple templates within QBO of these different customizations on the invoicing. So we have a lot of flexibility when it comes to this stuff. So all I have to do is go into here, accountant settings. I can customize it there, or I just go to custom form styles right here. Right? So you can see I've created a lot on here. You can actually go in and import a style from a Word document, and they give you download instructions and samples right here. And it goes from a Word document, upload it, you do some mapping and everything to make it look the way you want to. I will show you here, I have this upload test, and you can preview the PDF and see what that looks like. It's one of their samples I just re-uploaded into QBO so you can see what's going on of things. We also have this PDF sample that they provided, so you can go in and change those mappings and make that all pretty if you want to. But going with just the new style, just creating a new one, right? So let's create a new invoice style here. The first thing that you're going to see is that they have some built-in templates that you can use. They try to make things fancy, move stuff around. I don't know. However you want to lay it out, go for it, right? We can move the logo itself around. We can make it smaller, bigger, change that formatting, move all of that. You can do different colors, right? So if I want to do something a little bit more like the brand itself, or if I have the the HTML or the hex code for this, I can put that in there. Yeah, that comes back to me and website design stuff. But yeah, the hex code, yeah. Or you could just click a color if you want. You can do different fonts on here, so we have different options. And like always, we're going to want to do a PDF preview of this to make sure that we like what's going on. Now, into the meat of things, we can click on one of these content areas to start editing things. So I can click on this, say, what do I want to show? Do I want to show the business name or not? Do I want to add an address, website, all of this sort of stuff in here? Do I want to rename invoice to something else, right? So right there, do I want just a different name for it? Do I want to use custom transaction numbers? Do I want to use custom fields on here? All these different options. Next, we have the layout of the actual products and services on here. The account summary you can include on here. So what that does is if they have an open balance, it will say, hey, this is the balance that you had, here are the new charges, and here's the total amount due. Be careful with this because it can get confusing sometimes. You just want to pay attention as to how it's being shown on the invoicing. If you have a lot of open invoices, it depends on when you send it out as to what's the balance due is going to show up on which invoice that you send out. So that could cause some confusion. The other thing is when you send an email to a client with the account summary on here, it's going to show the total amount due on that email, not just the new charges amount. It's going to show you everything. So it could freak a client out that's like, oh, I owe $10,000, but this invoice right here is just for 500 or something. So just be aware of that. You want to know what's going on. This, we can change the columns if we want to, so I can move date over, and I can even change the labels of things, so I don't have to have it as date. I can just get rid of that if I want to. I can change the widths of stuff. It all has to still kind of work within each other. It only gives us, so much of what we can play around with because it's, a static line. But we can move these things around if we want to, just the layout of stuff. You can add quantity, or it's not going to let me at the moment. I don't even know if I have enough room. I can include a description here. So instead of having a separate section for description, I can put it under the product service. So it's kind of grouped together there. I can include the category if I want to. I have more activity options. So here's things to make the invoicing itself better. I can group activities by like day. We can put subtotals of these groups if we want to. Collapse activity rows if we want. Progress on line items. That is just in the email part. Show the markup on those billable expenses. We talked about those. If you want to show that markup, you can. And when you're showing the billable time, do you want to put in the employee's name? Do you want the hours and the rate, or just, just one thing? So we have a lot of different options going on. Down here, do we want to show the discount, the deposit? Again, this estimate summary, if we want to have on there. Change our message to customers, our fonts and everything, the size and how it all looks. Next, emails. So that's the most common way of sending out invoices now is via email, right? And this is setting up the defaults on how that email, what the message is to the customer, the subject line. Do you want it? Do you want to attach the PDF? Do you want to include the full details of the entire invoice or just the summarized details on there? I like to include that PDF because some clients don't want to use the e-invoice and go through the trouble of getting the PDF from there. I just go ahead and attach it to the email that goes out to them. So if they need to send it on to their payable system to pay it, whatever is going to make it easier for our clients to get paid, that's what I'm going for right there. Reminder email, again, just default, what kind of information, what do you want that email and everything to look like? Okay. Now, payments here, it gives us, do you want, as a default for this template, do you want to always give these options to be able to pay by a bank transfer or credit card on there? Those different options that we have. You have to make sure you have payments set up on here, right? You see this one doesn't have payments set up. So you want to make sure you have payments set up on here. And it's a default. You can still change it when you get into the invoice itself. Okay, so I could just say I just want to do bank transfers, and then I can preview the PDF, see what I created, the fanciness that I created. Yay! Okay, then I'm done, and I have that template save. So I did that one, right? I can then make this as the default template. So every time that I'm using an invoice, it would then become the default on it. Okay. So when I come into invoice and I invoice a client something, I'm going to save. I can then print preview this, and you see that I have that template all saved in here, right? If I want to change the one that I'm using, I can click on customize and I can change the template. So maybe I just want to make it the standard. Now make sure you're saving it, because otherwise it won't apply. It won't fix it. So then I would print preview, and now it has a whole new different look and feel to it. Cool? So that's how we can go in and do all these customization on the invoices themselves. Okay, invoicing. So let's get into it. The actual options that we have with this screen and everything that we can do that's possible with invoicing itself. Okay, so I'm going to dive into QBO yet again, and I'm going to actually create a new invoice right here. So let's look at all of these fields, right? Once I select a client, it's going to auto-populate everything from that client information, remember? So this one didn't have an email address, but we can add it here. We can always change it. Remember, everything is flexible, so we can always change it once we're in here. I can go in and change the billing information if I want to. I can click on what do I want to allow the client, how they could pay online if they want to do either one of these. I can have the option to carbon copy emails, blind carbon copy emails to people. There's that checkbox to send later. If I want to do that, I can do that, and it just becomes a filter option within the invoice area, so that once I actually send it, that checkbox would uncheck itself. Okay. Terms, invoice date, all of that. The location, that is set up within company settings. I have locations turned on and classes turned on, right? Ship via da da da. Now, these are custom fields where if I enter in the information, enter in something in there, it will then show up. Now, let me see if I get an error because I didn't put anything in here yet. Okay. Save. So I have ship via. I have something in here, but I don't have anything in shipping date or tracking number, right? So when I go and I do a print preview, you can see I have ship via, and I have that. So we can have these custom fields in place, and we don't have to utilize them. If we don't utilize them, they don't show up on the invoice. So you don't have to worry about like these empty blank areas, with a header and no information. That doesn't happen. So that's always nice, right? Location of sale is where we're selling something. This goes into, this impacts sales tax, which I'll show you guys soon. Then we have our service date, product service code on here. We can always add a new one directly from here if we want to. Remember, once I utilize a product or service, it brings in whatever information I've filled in on the product and service in here, right? I can say if this is taxable or not, so I can override what is the default on here if I want to. So I can change that. Fun. Um, we can, once you click on a line, you have the plus sign right here, so we can add more lines or we can delete lines over here. We can also add a subtotal. So if I have, let's see, if I come in here and add something and say that's a thousand, okay, right? I have that, this showing up underneath here. I can move this around. I can put this up. So now I have a subtotal of 1500 and it's grouping it that way. It's a little different from the bundles, right? But I can put in that subtotal of things. I can clear all the lines, which I'm not going to do, but obviously, yes, I can then delete the subtotal or add the subtotal back, all of that. We have the message that shows up on the invoice. If you do send out a statement later, what, do you want a message for that? Let's see. Sales tax, right here, we'll talk about soon. Discount. Do you want to switch this so that the discount is taken before sales tax is calculated, or is it after sales tax is calculated? Different agencies are going to require different things. You can put in shipping cost here, or you can have a product or service that is for shipping. I don't have one set up, but you could do that here as well if you want to. And then I have the deposit field turned on. When I turn on the deposit field on that, it adds this area up here of where is that deposit going. Okay, so it'll actually create a little mini deposit or mini payment within QBO directly right here. And I can say this is going to undeposited funds right there. So you'll see that later on. Okay, let me save this sucker. Now, down here, we have our print preview, right? I can preview this. Awesome. I can do a packing slip, which doesn't give you the dollar amount of things. It just gives you this slip, which would then, if you're in a warehouse setting or something, you would give this to the warehouse people, and that's what they're going to pull and include in the package when they send it out. So again, you don't have the dollar amount on it. Sometimes we want that separation so that the warehouse doesn't see that. Now, we can copy this, we can void it, we can delete it. We can look at the transaction journal on the transaction. When we do that, it shows us the journal entry. So we would see our debits and credits, how things are working down here. Okay, so we have all of that. Then I can click on this. It brings me right back to the transaction, the invoice. Now I can come in here and I can do audit history. When I do audit history, it shows me the history of the transaction and any changes that were made on here. Again, I can click back to the invoice. Awesome. I can customize like I showed you guys and change the invoice template that we're using, or I can edit the current style. I can create a new one from here, all of that fun stuff. Then also now I can make this invoice recurring. So recurring transactions are really, really cool. And this is kind of bonus information here. I just create a template name for it. We have different types of recurring transactions. Can it be scheduled? Have a QBO just remind me that I need to create this transaction, or unscheduled, which really is creating a template that I can utilize later. So if it's scheduled, I can say how many days in advance do I want to do it? Do I want to do 0? So create it the actual day I tell you to, or 10 days before, or whatever you want to do, right? Put in my client name, the email, again, same fields pretty much as the invoice. We just got more fields than before. Do I want to automatically send these emails once the invoice is created? Do I want to automatically send that out? Do I want to automatically include any unbilled charges? Think about that automation. That's pretty cool right there. Do I want to have, what's my default on this invoice? What payments am I going to accept? Then our interval. Do I want to do this daily, weekly, yearly? We have all those options right here. When are we going to start this? And then when are we going to end it? We can end it by a certain date. We don't even have to have an ending if we don't want to. We can end it after so many times. So, after 4 invoices, stop, right? So maybe like I do it for 4 months and it should stop after that point, right? So those are all of these things that we can do. And if I were to, let's do just today on here, and then I save, I'm going to get rid of the deposit because that's not going to be in a recurring invoice. I'm going to save the template, and then I can go to my gear, go to recurring transactions themselves, and you can see that I have that recurring invoice set up in here. I can come in, edit, and see what all's going on and how it's going to create things. You can also do sales receipts in here, recurring transactions for sales receipts. I'm going to talk more about sales receipts in a minute, but know that sales receipts are invoices plus the payments together. If you want to automatically create a payment, accept payments monthly or on a schedule, you can do that with a sales receipt. You would have the payment method. If this was connected to QB Payments, it would have a checkbox to process the credit card upon creation and saving, and I would have that option in there. Okay, so yes, it's an option to do. You can't really see it right now, but I swear it's in there. Okay, so that's how we're going to get through invoicing. Next, I'm going to be talking about progress invoicing and continue on into different little more examples and specific areas within the invoicing process itself. Okay, so let's talk about progress invoicing. And I touched on it a little bit already, but I'm going to go through it all now from beginning to end. So we actually use estimates when we're doing progress invoicing. And we want to make sure first we're going to go into accountant settings, going over to sales, right? And we want to turn on progress invoicing. That allows you to create invoices that you're partially invoice off of a single estimate. See, you have partial invoices from a single estimate right there, right? Okay, so yeah, we create multiple invoices from one estimate, and we want to make sure that is turned on, otherwise we can't do what we're trying to do, right? Okay, I am going to go done. Now, we come in, we want to go and create a new estimate, right? And I'll come in here and we're going to do some stuff like 3, let's do 2,500 because we all need more money, right? Consulting off of that, that's like $10,000, right? There you go. And we'll do that. Oh, another consulting. Okay, so I have this estimate now, right? I'm gonna save it. That checkbox always gets me. When you get that error, just uncheck it and save. Okay. Now, that's usually when I'm playing around with things. Most of the time I actually have the email address where I can send it out. But hey, here we go. So we have our estimate. This is our starting point, right? And from the beginning, I can now create an invoice from this. And because I have that setting turned on, that's why I'm seeing this screen of how do I want to invoice it. You saw before, I just click all lines and that gives you everything. You just create one invoice off of it right there, right? Then I can do specific, like I can do, say, 33% off of each line, right? And that'll give me that amount. And we can also do a custom amount for each one. If I clicked on that, it would then just go in straight into the invoice and do that. So let's go for it. Let's see what that is, right? So what you see now are, here are those 3 lines, and I click on one of these and I can say the custom amount for each one. I can say a percentage of this, so 33% of this, and then let's do 67% of that, and percent, and we're just going to keep 0% of that so far. Okay, so now that's doing that percentage and it's laying that all out for me. I'm going to save it. Oh, guys, you think I would figure this one out, right? Save it. Right there. I can make those edits, and what's happening, we have our summary of everything that's going on down here. I have a link back to that estimate, so the total amount, right? This invoice is showing me the 2170, and then the total amount that has been invoiced will be there. Okay, let's look at a print preview to see what the invoice looks like. So what I have set up here is the layout. Again, remember we can customize how all of this looks. This looks like one of the ones I was playing around with, so it's kind of ugly. But you could see how this all is laid out. Really, we would probably want to get another template on there. Okay. So there's our first invoice on things. Okay, so I'm going to save and close that. Now, I can go back to that estimate right here. And now what has happened is I can see what's been invoiced and what's remaining on things. So maybe I now come into my next invoice that I need to invoice out. So I'm going to create the invoice and I'll do custom amount for each line here. And say that I want to do percentage, and I'll do 50% of that line, right? I'm going to do 50% of that line and 0% of that, or do 100% of that. Okay, so save it. Here's the thing, I went over, remember? I went over on here on one of those things because this second line I had invoiced 66% before, and now I did 50%. And it gave me this notification that I am going over one of the estimated lines. So I actually want to cancel that. Okay. And come in here and what is it? 34%. We're going to go back in and let's try it again. Oh, nope. Cancel. Let's do 33%. Save. Oh, same thing with the email. Okay. Save. Do. So here now I have an update. So I have that invoice and now this invoice. So I can click into that other invoice that I had done, or I could do this invoice, or I could come back to the estimate. So, you know, unfortunately, it doesn't show you in this screen what you've invoiced so far, but you do get that notification if you're going overboard on things. But at the same time, you have that ability to go in and override the estimate amount. So you can do that if you want to. Not sure if you want to, but you can, right? But so I clicked on the estimate. Now I've come back in here and you can see that I have these two line items. They have been closed off, right? So those are done. Now I just want to create my final invoice. So I'm going to create that and do remaining total of all lines. Create that invoice. Save. That's going to be a joke now. Save. And save and close. And I'm going to go back to that estimate. And you can see the estimate is closed. I have 3 linked transactions up here. Those are those invoices. And here are the line items. Everything's been invoiced, the remaining amount on here. Now, if I want to go to those invoices, I can click on one of those. Let's look at the most recent one. Again, you see that one line item there, and you can see this layout here of what is remaining. This doesn't show up on the invoice itself, this little summary. This is for you to look at and make sure that you're taking care of everything. So That's how we deal with the progress invoicing itself. So what if I go in and I delete this? Okay, and I want to go in here and look at estimates and progress invoicing summary by client. So when I click on that report, now I'm getting to this and I can see, okay, here are all the statuses of everything, right? My estimates, how much the estimate is, what's been invoiced, and the remaining balance on things. So look at all those nice options on here, guys. So it's listing all of those estimates out for you. We can go in and we can filter it down to a specific client if we want to, but that's pretty much it on here. So it's a nice little report. Um, I see some areas for improvement, but this is where we can get that summary of how everything is going on the files, the estimates and progress invoicing, just a big picture view of things. Great. Okay, now on to sales tax. And this is a fun one, right? And the biggest thing that takeaway that you need to know about sales tax is that there's a lot of stuff that QuickBooks can do in here, but you need to have a clear understanding as to how sales tax needs to be calculated and how the return needs to be prepared. When does sales tax apply to the different jurisdictions? All of this stuff, you need to have a clear understanding of all of that um, almost before you get into actually tracking sales tax and everything. You want to have a clear understanding of what you need to do. And that's going to be outside of QBO, doing research with the state and all of that fun stuff. But I'm going to show you how this all works within QBO, so you can have an idea of how you can customize it to fit the needs of your client and everything. Okay, so to get to taxes, we can come over here and just click on taxes on the left. As you can see, I have some issues because this is a test company and I make a lot of, do crazy things with this account, right? We're going to see some, you're going to see a lot of crazy stuff. It doesn't quite make sense in here, but okay. So you see, first I want to talk to you about this e-filing made easy. The biggest issue we have as of right now is that they do not provide e-filing for cash basis clients. Or, so here's the thing. I know in some agencies you could be reporting on a cash basis, but maybe you keep accrual based books or something, or reverse or something like that. So you want to have a clear understanding as to how the sales tax are reported with whichever state or county or whatever. You want to know that too. But know that if you are doing cash basis, we can't do the automatic e-file that QBO provides. Now, that might be a good thing or not. I don't know. I haven't tested out the e-filing and all of that sort of stuff to really go into it. All I know is that there's so many issues that could go wrong with sales tax that I like to have more control of things. And I've talked about this before. Until I get really comfortable with how the system works, I'm going to control that sucker. Okay. And I'm going to watch it and make sure that it's doing what I want it to do. And it'll take a while to give me the confidence to just let the system take over on things. So, here's what we do. We have sales tax. In company settings, you're going to want to turn on sales tax first, but you can come over here, taxes, right? And first thing is the sales tax settings. And we want to say what agencies we're dealing with here. Okay, so I can turn on, add any of these agencies. I can come in. The edit is very minimal. There's not much we can edit here. We can change the filing frequency and the start date to things, but not much else, right? I can add a new agency. So you can see here we got a lot of stuff, this whole drop down of things going on. Let's see. We got Colorado, Idaho. Look at all of this sort of stuff in here, right? I'm going to click South Carolina. Okay, and say yearly, and let's see if I can start it today. Save. Okay, so now I have a new one enabled in here. So I'm going to go back to the Sales Tax Center. You want to set those up for whatever agencies you're going to do reporting for. Again, you have to decide and determine when you need to report to different agencies. That's not something that you're going to get out of QuickBooks. You need to do that research and figure that out. Okay. So one, we did tell us where we collect the taxes. When we look at our products and services, we want to look at them and see which ones are taxable. So if I go click on that, it gives me the listing of products and services, right? I can come in and edit this inventory item on here, and I can put in the sales tax category. So do I tax it at the standard rate, or do I put, is it not taxable, or should I put in a special category? And when you look at the special categories, we have a ton of different options in here because, again, different agencies have different rules for some of these special categories. So you can go ahead and fill these out on things and say, okay, maybe this is an alcohol item, so that it knows that, and it knows based on what state you're looking and all that sort of stuff. It supposedly knows how to handle it all. Again, you want to make sure that you're overseeing that and making sure that everything is correct on those things. Okay. Double check your client addresses because it depends on where the sales tax is calculated. Is it coming from the sales tax from your location or where you're shipping something to, that it's then on that location? Okay. So if I go in and do an invoice and pick our nice little company right here, you see over here I have a location of sale listed, right? So that is going to figure out how to calculate the tax for me. So I'm going to do $600, right? And it's doing this. Let me get this little sucker out of the way. Now it's calculated the sales tax for me, right? On the invoice itself, I can see the math. I can click it to see the math. So it knows that I am located in Georgia, right? And it's going with the Georgia Department of Revenue to calculate the sales tax because it's based on where things are sold to calculate this one, just the way it's set up, okay? So, and now it's splitting up what's going on within my specific location. So for my reporting with Georgia, I need to know what's the state sales, the total state sales. I need to know the county sales, and then if there's any other sales in it. So if I'm selling to a lot of places within Georgia, it's going to be tracking the different locations and different things on there. But you can see this is the breakdown of your sales tax rate. And so we get to our 8% right there, okay? The tax categories and totals, we have that. I can override things if I need to, so you still have that flexibility, but I'm not going to do that in this case. And you can see how this is all split up on here, right? So I'm going to close that out. That's how you can see what's going on behind the scenes, and you can make any adjustments if you need to. So I'm going to save and close. Oh, guys, seriously, I'm going to save and close that. I told you last time it's going to be a joke, right? It is. And then what you want to do before you go in to create your return or whatever, you can go to your reports. We have the tax liability report. So let me click on that, right? Let me go to this year or this month even. Now, remember, this is going off the accrual method. I could change it to cash basis and then it wouldn't pick up it hardly picks up anything because we haven't accepted payments on anything yet. But accrual is just going off of the invoicing themselves. So look at this. I have my gross amount for Georgia State, the non-taxable amount, and then the taxable amount and the tax amount itself. Don't add all of this stuff up because our gross amount total is 22,000. Okay? Our non-taxable amount total is 20,500. Okay? And our total taxable amount is 2,100. But you saw how that rate is split up into three different things. That's how we're getting to that tax amount, right? So that's how that report is working for you. And I want you to keep the support for this stuff. You might even want to go in to these reports. Let me go back to this month, run it. You might want to click on this so that we can get to our total to show you how we got in up, how we calculated that number. Okay, so it's these three invoices, and that's how we calculated the 2,100. And that's how the 4% rate on Georgia is 8,400, right? That's how we get there on things. We want to have some sort of supporting documentation when you come back to preparing these returns. So if I look now at view return, you can see that I have this information in here. My gross sales, now this is from last month, so it's from September to November, so that's why it's a different dollar amount, right? Our gross sales are taxable sales. You can add your adjustment here. So if you have some sort of reason to increase or decrease the total amount that you are paying to the different states, this is where we're going to enter it in. Okay, so if I do a credit, what account is it going to in $5, right? Okay, add. Now it's updating that information, right? Now it's saying to print out the tax form with your state's website, blah, blah, blah. Most of these states are online, so you're going to end up filling this out online, most likely. But here we go, select filing method, and remember, it doesn't support cash basis right now, so it's not going to work. So I'm going to file manually right here. Okay, let's download your full report. And it's giving me that information. Again, you want more information than that, okay? You don't want just this. You want to have more supporting documentation. I want some sort of support to show me what the total taxable or the total gross sales are, the total non-taxable, then taxable. So we probably really want to go back to that report. Save. Go back to this liability report. We want to have this information first. So let's do last quarter. Is that the period that we're looking at? I think. So we want to have this information, and then you might even want to go in and have, and like I said, share the detail as to what transactions actually came up with it. And guys, this is easy. Just export to Excel so you have the support saved somewhere. The worst thing that happens is when things change in QBO and there's a situation that happens with the sales tax return, you go back into QBO and you're like, the dollar amount doesn't match what the sales tax return says. I don't know why that's happening. You know, I did it right. I know I did it right. Now I messed up. Now I'm going to have to go into the audit trail and figure out why there are differences, what's going on, blah, blah, blah. If you just have the support, then you have the support right there, right? That's what we're going for. We want the support and have it so that, you know, if anyone has any questions, like, here you go. And you can clearly then identify between your support and what's in QBO now, if there's a difference or anything like that. It's just exporting reports, like I said, to Excel. You don't have to do a lot of work. Just export them, save them, just in case. Okay, so here we go in, record that payment, and do the payment date, what bank account on there, and record payment. You cannot record payments just as a check or anything like that. Okay, you have to go through this method to record the payment itself. So make sure you are doing that. Okay, and we can look at history right here, and you can see I have the view return. right? And we have all of this. Let's click on that. We have the detail. Oop. And here we can actually delete that payment if you want to. So if you run into any issues, this is where you come in and delete that payment. I'm going to actually X out of that and then cancel out of this because I do want to keep that payment in there. And I'm going to come back to that. And that's pretty much the summary of everything that's going on within the sales tax area. As you can see, there's a lot of stuff that can change or be impacted on things. So again, having a very clear understanding of how tax is calculated on these invoices, how it should be reported, all of that sort of stuff. We want that before we even jump into QBO to make, to customize all of that, because we got to make sure that we know what we're paying attention to. And, if QBO is not working a certain way or something like that, we want to make sure we're on top of it, because the worst thing is filing returns and submitting returns on inaccurate information. Okay, we want to make sure all this stuff is working right. Okay, so next we are going to talk about payments. Excited? I know you are. Okay, let's now talk about receive payments and what the best practices are when you actually receive a payment. So I will tell you up front, yes, you can match an invoice to a deposit in the bank feed, and that actually creates its own receive payment. But it can result in issues if you have a lot of payments that you're dealing with, different ways that you accept payments and all of that. It can cause issues. So this might take a couple more seconds, but it will help you avoid all of those issues and mistakes down the road. So this is why it's the preferred method of doing things. So when we go in and do a receive payment, we just create that, and we like to book it to undeposited funds. This goes back to the day and age where people would come in, bring you checks or mail you checks, and you would have those on site, but not yet deposited into the bank yet, right? And so then you would eventually go to the bank and then record that deposit. Now, that sometimes still happens. And sometimes there are multiple payments that get into one deposit. And because of that, it is beneficial to go ahead and record things to undeposited funds. And when you record things to undeposited funds, it sits in an area on the bank deposit to quickly check them off. So you don't have to spend a lot of time and energy on making it all work. Like I said, this is going to be a couple extra seconds to do all of this, but you avoid so many problems by doing that. So let's get into the receive payment area. So first, here's the bank deposit. And what I'm showing you here is that we have several items that are sitting here that are sitting in undeposited funds. These are ready to be deposited into the bank. And I can come in and check off these three, maybe even add something else. Maybe we got a refund check from something or whatever. I can add that here. And then the total amount we want is to match it to this total deposit amount right here. So by doing that, we got everything going on, all nice and pretty. It's awesome. Okay. Now you see these sitting here. These are they say type invoice. It's because we utilize that deposit field on those invoices. And that's why it's showing up here. It's not just going to show all open invoices for you here. That's not where this shows up. Okay. So that's the benefit here. And we have the total amount that's going to match to the bank feed, and it's all going to make us all happy at the end of the day. Yay, right? It's nice and clean that way. Now, if I go into a payment, so this is what we do when we receive a payment. We would come in and we say what client it is. Once I click on the client, then it gives me a listing of all of the outstanding transactions that I have for the client. I can check off as many or as little as I want. This is where it's nice where you can apply a payment to a specific invoice. So is it the oldest invoice that things get applied to? Did you get something from your end customer that says what invoice it's specifically for? I can make sure that that is taken care of in here. So maybe it's $400 applied to this exact invoice, and that's what I need to be checking off and applying to. I can change these amounts over here as well. And then as you can see, I'm depositing to undeposited funds. You can put in your reference number. So this is a check that was received. I can put in check if I want to. It's not necessary, but you can. And then we have all of this information in here. Okay, so we have all of this. This is a nice, pretty received payment. It's going to undeposited funds. It's all taken care of. I will tell you, if you also have payments set up, so let me show you this. So say I have payments set up and I've received the credit card information from the client. They got the email that they could pay online, but they don't want to do that. They just want to give you the credit card information and process the payment for it, right? So when I'm in the invoice, I can click receive payment. And then if I go to credit card, a new area is going to pop up to allow me to enter in credit card information. Or if I already have credit card information for the client, it will pop up that credit card information in there and will give me the option to process the payment there. So awesome, I can do that, right? So if I print this, then I will then have a receipt for that payment. Okay. There is also save and send, where I can send that receipt on to that end customer. So awesome, right? I don't have an email address on there, so it's not going to go anything. And so for right now, I'm just going to do save and close. So we can, when we do that deposit, again, come over here, new, receive payment. I can enter in the client. I can also enter in an invoice number, and it will find that customer for me. If I just come in here, if I don't have any amount applied, I can still put in a payment. It will just be sitting on their balances, an open amount that can be applied to an invoice later. So several different options here. And remember, undeposited funds. That's where we want to deposit these payments into. Cool? Okay, so now let's talk about sales receipts. And sales receipts are awesome because they are invoices and payments in one transaction screen. They're meant more for a transaction that takes place where you sell and receive payment at the same time. So whereas an invoice you send out and you wait for that payment, this happens at the same time. It can be an in-person retail sort of situation, online retail, several different situations where you can use a sales receipt. A lot of people actually use sales receipts to record their sales from their point of sale solution. So you have a whole bunch of sales in one day. You might actually enter one sales receipt for all of those transactions in one day. There's a ton of different options here, but the most important part is to know that a sales receipt is both an invoice and a payment in one. So we don't need to worry about receive payment in this situation. So let's go in to start a new sales receipt. So if I go in and do new and then sales receipt, what you're going to see is a form that looks very similar to an invoice, right? We have all of these fields down here. So if I come in here, I create a new client, pull down the client information, get all of that stuff in here. I'm going to book this sales receipt to undeposited funds because remember, it's just best practice to put things in undeposited funds. then it's the same kind of information we put in here. Okay. What I'll tell you is that we have sales tax over here, our discount, all of this sort of stuff is the same. The new thing is tips. If I have tips turned on in the company settings area, this is where you'll see the box on it. Tips do not show up on invoices, they show up on sales receipts. And if I were to enter any information into tips, it will be booked to undistributed tips. And then you are going to have to do the extra work of figuring out how to record those tips to the specific employees and stuff. So they have set up a way to put in the information to go to undistributed tips. They have not set up a system to help you actually take care of those undistributed tips and associate them to the right employees and the right contractors, all of that sort of stuff. Okay, so that is a whole nother higher level thing to deal with. But outside of that, we have sales receipts, we put in this information, and it is all taken care of. You can also, like I showed you in receive payments, you can put in the credit card information and then store it so that it can process it when you save and close it. The other thing you can do within sales receipts is that we can actually make transactions recurring. You can do that with a multitude of transactions, but when I make a sales receipt recurring, and I'll just click that and you can see here we have a whole bunch of different options. How often do I want to create the sales receipt? When does it start? Do I want to end after like 3 times or something like that? I have some clients that they might pay for something over 3 months, so I'll put in this recurring sales receipt over 3 months there, and it's taken care of. And I can say process the credit card. Again, we don't have the best view of this because I don't have payments set up on this account, but it would show up a down here to process the card and a little checkbox to process the card when you save and close it. So what would happen is if I automate this and I have that little checkbox selected, then you're actually going to process that credit card automatically every time it is created. So that is huge automation for your business right there. Okay, guys, we are getting so close to the end. I know this has been a lot, but you are doing awesome. Okay, so a couple more things to talk about on the sales workflow. First, refunds. Okay, there's a couple different ways to do refunds within QBO. So what I want you to think of is that credit memos here is one way to do a refund, and it's similar to the invoice screen where we're just recording the transaction but not the actual payment of it. So we don't get the payment of the refund back to the customer, where just similar to an invoice, we don't receive the payment until later. So it's something that is going to need to be applied to an invoice in the future. Okay, so that's a credit memo. Next, we have refund receipts. Refund receipts, remember, we have receipt in the name, sounds just like sales receipt. They act the same way. This is actually refund from. So it's actual cash that's coming out or of, a credit card, a checking account, whatever. The method is, and you can actually print the check from here. Print it, put in the check number if you want, all of that. Okay, so refund receipt is the actual transaction plus the payment, whereas the credit memo is just the information that will be applied in the future. Okay, so let's go into QBO and see how this actually works. I have my sales receipt still up. So let's go in and do a credit memo on something, okay? So I think I have some stuff open for that client. I'm going to come in here and create that and say that it is a, I just want to save and close. Oh, stupid email. Okay, save and close. I want to do that so I can get right back on into it. So you can look at what we have going on. My screen, my search button has not been showing me all my recent stuff recently. There's a little bug going around on some things in QBO. So by the time you read it, I hope it's all taken care of. But I can still use my recent transactions in here to get back to that credit memo that I was telling you, because it didn't have just a save and keep on showing the screen. So I do have this credit memo all taken care of. I have the information. I can print or preview. Again, save and close. I could save and send that, so I can send that to the customer if I want to. Then the question is, how do I actually apply this credit memo, right? So what I'm going to come in and do is I'm going to go and do a receive payment on here, just because I know that I have open amounts due for this client, right? So I have these open invoices right here. And now look at this area. I have credits. If I scroll down, I see my credit memo listed there. So if I click this sucker, right, I can click this. So now I have that invoice is $973. I have my credit memo of $500 that was applied to it. Say that I didn't receive any other payment. I want to zero that out. So now it's just showing $500 is being applied to this invoice, and and I'm utilizing this credit memo that I have outstanding for it. So at that point, I can save and close. Now, let's see if I have nope, still don't have my recent transactions working for me. I'm going to go over to invoices, clients, that client. Let's go here. So now I have my credit memo. If I click on the credit memo itself, you'll see that it shows as paid. So it has been applied to a payment now, right? And I can go back to it. It shows the payment that I just created, and that's how it was applied to that invoice. Now, if I want to do a refund receipt, right, and I put it in here, that is actually issuing funds immediately back to the client. Okay, so here I have this. It's not being applied to an invoice in the future. This is actually, I'm just going ahead and sending you the refund, right? So here's the check. Here, refund from which account. Again, you can do a credit card if you want to. We can use payments. Use the check number, and then we can do save and send, save and new, and save and close. Okay, so if I did save and send, I'll be able to send that out to the end customer. So that's how those two different refunds work. Like my little error that's coming up, because I've already used this check number, I need to do a different one. I'm going to put in print later. Okay, save and close. Refund successfully issued to that client. Awesome. So that's how those two differences are taken care of. And now you can see within the Customer Center, I have a refund listed, and I also have a credit memo. So see how those work? Okay, so this is our last topic. And it's a little fun here. We have some things that we're going to talk about. Okay, we're going to talk about different things you can do within collections with utilizing different features within QBO, and what to look at, what to do on things. So things we're going to talk about: viewing the e-invoice history. When we actually email out an invoice, we can go back and see how if that invoice has been viewed or opened by people, so we can kind of get an idea of what's going on with that invoice. There's an easy way to send invoice reminders. I'm going to talk about statements. How do you do those? And then we can turn on late fees and look at that. Okay, so jumping over into QBO. Okay, in QBO, we can see here that I've gone through and sorted my invoice list to find something that has been viewed before. So I could see here that this is overdue, but it has been viewed, right? So I'm actually going to open up that invoice. And what happens is you can see last delivery date was on January 22nd, a long time ago from this recording. And when you scroll down, you can see that history, right? So when I sent the invoice and when it was viewed, okay? Now, I have come across recently someone in my QBO Chat Scholars program did some investigating and found out that if you are copying anyone on these invoices, if they look at the invoice, so say you're copying yourself, if they look at the invoice, that shows up here too. So it doesn't show you exactly who viewed it, it shows you that it's been viewed. But I utilize this sometimes when I'm sending it out to my clients' customers to see if, like, are they actually getting these invoices? Are they actually opening these, right? If they are and they're not paying, then sending them another email or sending them a statement or something like that from QBO could be, helpful to collect the money off of that. If they aren't opening them, then is there really a point of trying to send something out again from QBO, or is it something where I need to talk to my client, have them call their customer, send an email from something else, that sort of situation. So you kind of want to take a look at that to see, hopefully there's activity on here. You could see people are actually opening their emails and looking at this stuff, right? So if they are, then when we are in here, and so here is just being invoicing invoices, right? I can come down here and do a drop down and say send reminder. Okay, so that will actually email the client and send them a reminder. And if I do that, we have the reminder text that's already set up in our company settings, which we can customize. We can also customize here if we want to. And just a reminder, we haven't received it, so it sends it out to them as well. The other thing we can do is we can share the invoice link itself. So if I get this invoice link and I copy it, so copied, okay, and I close that and I come over here and I paste that invoice link, it'll show me the e-invoice itself, right? So with that invoice link, I could actually send a separate email from my own email address, or my client can send the email, and I can include that link there. So it'll take them directly to the invoice itself. It doesn't, I'm not sure if it tracks it within here, but you can look at it and, hopefully they will receive that email in that instance. So let's click on this, scroll down, and it actually does show that I viewed that invoice today. But remember, it says that they viewed it, so it was actually me that viewed it. So be careful as to relying completely on this information. Now, when I'm in the client itself, you don't have to do this just on invoices. You can look at the client itself, going through the client list, and do a send reminder right there, okay? So that's always possible to do. The issue that comes in is if we have a whole bunch of things that are open that need to get, that we need to send out. Are we going to send out 500 reminders to clients? Or maybe we should send a statement. Statements are a little tricky within QBO. They don't actually get saved in this history area. So it's something that you kind of want to keep track of outside. So maybe you copy yourself on emails or something like that. There are 3 different types of statements. So we have a balance forward, right? So the balance forward is saying anything, we're going to have a start date, show any activity that happens in that, but after that start date to my end date. Okay, so if I do that, apply, and I do a print preview, you can see I have that start date, my balance forward, and have everything that happened since then. Okay, all transactions that happened and what my balance is, so I come up with my ending balance on things, right? Now, the other thing is I can do open items. So this shows all open invoices themselves. So if I click that, do a print preview, I can see all my invoices, the amount, and then the open amount that's on there. So again, it's a different view. We're looking at different things. The total due is the same, but it's a matter of what information do we need to communicate with that end customer to make sure that they have the information they need to pay us or pay our clients as quick as possible. The next one is a transaction statement. Again, coming from 1118 to 1218, let's look at that. So you can see the amounts and what's been received, right? And we're ending up with a little, just total amounts and the total received. It just doesn't give us that beginning balance number. It just is the information from that one period to the next. So it could be helpful in some situations or not. It all depends. But that's why it's so important to know the differences between these different options that we have in here. So that's just one way to get that all that information in here. I still feel like some of these things can be rather confusing when sending stuff to a client. So one thing I have done recently, and I'm throwing an audible, I know we have a couple minutes left in this training, but I'm going for it, okay? We're going to go into the balance sheet. And then, again, I got QuickBooks has some bugs going on during this recording, so ignore this. It shouldn't look like this anymore. So then I ran the detail for accounts receivable, okay? What I'm going to do is on accounts receivable, actually, first let me refresh this so it looks more like a normal report, because that's how we fix this little bug currently. I'm going to customize. I'm going to do a filter and look at just one customer, okay? So I'm running that and run the report, okay? So here it gives me beginning balance information. So if I ran this, let's see, from January through now, we can see our payments. Let's actually run it through today. Now you see all the activity. So that 15,176, we see that number here. We can see all the activity. This is easier for me to see and comprehend. So it's able to say, okay, here's where everything happened and how it doesn't necessarily match up, show what payment was applied to what invoice in this view, but it gives me a running balance. So I prefer this method to look at things. I'll export this and send it off to a client, or I can just email from here and email that as a PDF. What you can do is also take away some of this information, things that the end user is not going to care about. So I can get rid of the name. I can get rid of a lot of this account, the split, but I want that amount in the balance. I can put in the, I'll remove that. I'm going to put the name back, or put that client right there. And try to get out of that screen. Okay, now I'm back. And apparently I moved stuff around, but that's okay. You see how customizable this is on the report. So now I have that information where it's just that running of all the transactions that happen. You can see what all's going on. It's easier for me to view, so it might be easier for that end customer to understand. These are all depending on what situation you're in and what information that end client is asking for. So sometimes they ask for what are my open invoices, and you can send over that statement to tell them that. So there's all those different options of things going on. Okay, so the last thing we're talking about, though, are those late fees. So when are we going to apply, and how do those late fees work? Right? So let's open this sucker up and go to a recent invoice. So here you see I have late fees apply, 2% of remaining balance once per invoice with the these are all the settings I set up within company settings as to how late fees are taken care of. So it knows that, hey, I haven't received payment, so I'm going to apply that. It was applied on the 17th and it's taken care of. It's just automatically applied on there. So that's how those late fees work. Let's go back, remind you again in accountant settings, I believe under sales, we have late fees. I click on edit. I can say flat fee percentage, grace period, all of this information is in here, ready to go. Okay. So that's how, one more tool that we can utilize on there. If these tools aren't enough for you in your collections process, there are several different apps that can help with collections and doing different things. All you need to do is go to apps.com and search for apps there. Those are all ones that have been vetted by QuickBooks that have the proper security and all that sort of stuff to connect to QBO. Now, if they're not on apps.com, that doesn't mean that they don't have the proper security. They just haven't gone through that long vetting process with Intuit. Sometimes it's not something a high concern for them, so it just doesn't happen. You just want to do your own research and figure out, look at reviews and all of that sort of stuff. But there are definitely a ton of different apps out there that help with collections and automating the processes. I just wanted to show you what's available within QBO before you have to jump to one of those. I'm one of those people that says like, hey, let's utilize the software as much as we can until basically we're busting at the seams. So that's why I'm giving you all those options. Okay, so that's it. We're done. Okay, let me escape out of here. I'm trying to get out. I swear I'm trying. Okay, that's it. End of slideshow. We are done, guys. You made it through the sales workflow training. I'm so proud of you. Thank you so much. And I hope that you are ready for the expense workflow training because that's the next one in our intro series. Have a great one. Thanks.